This Sunday,
the Friends are coming! The Friends are coming!
Sons of Liberty, history's new scripted drama.
Hand over to Trey to Samuel Adams and John Hancock.
The untold story of a group of rebels
These are our streets!
who brought an empire to its knees.
These people are asking for a war. We're going to give them one.
Let's show them what we're made of. Fire!
A 3-night special event, Sons of Liberty. Premieres Sunday at 9, 8 Central on History.
ESPN Radio. This is the Thundering Herd Podcast.
I'm in a very weird spot today. For the first time in my adult life, I go into a weekend of football as a broadcaster. I've been doing that for a couple decades, and I'm rooting for teams to win. I've never been a root guy. I root for drama, I root for tire fires, I root for great stories. That's the way it's always worked for me. And like, fans will come up to me and they'll go like, who do you root? Who's your favorite team? And I'm like, I don't care. I really don't. I thought Denver would beat Seattle in the Super Bowl. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I've never been that guy. My favorite college football team is USC. I didn't grow up in Los Angeles. I've never been that guy. As a kid, I knew I wanted to be a sportscaster, so I watched all the teams when I was 7, 8, 9 years old. I've never really cared. I like the way the Patriots are run. I like historically the way the New York Giants are run, the Packers are run, Spurs are run, Cardinals are run. I'm a fan of business. So if you get your act together and you run your company well, I'm a fan of you. I told somebody on a plane the other day, I said, I really like Brady. I think he's pretty cool. I said, but I just like the way New England's run. Like, I don't ever root for a crappy business. It's hard to root for, like, the Mets. You know what I mean? It's, like, hard to root for a franchise that, like, has low self-esteem. It's hard to root for the Cleveland Browns for me. It's very easy for me to root for the St. Louis Cardinals or the San Francisco Giants, not just because they win, because they're well run. I like the way Duke basketball is run. Doesn't matter if they win. I like the way they're run. So this weekend, it's weird. It's a weird spot for me. I don't really care who wins these games. I just want an interesting show. But this weekend, I kind of think it's Tom Brady's last chance to win a Super Bowl. Because I think by next year, Andrew Luck's going to own the AFC for a decade. I think he's going to own it. This is the worst team Andrew Luck's ever going to be on. They're building. Now they got pretty good corners. Now they got some good tight ends and receivers. Once, with one more draft and free agency, they saw their offensive line get a little better. They're not terrible at linebacker. They're kind of average. They're going to own this thing. Manning's going to go. Brady's going to go. And they're going to own it. Andy Dalton's not beating Andrew Luck in this league. Not going to happen. Big Ben's getting older. Flacco may knock him off occasionally. It's going to be Andrew Luck's AFC. In fact, if Andrew Luck beats Tom Brady this weekend, the torch has been passed. It's over. It's over. Manning's done. Manning's done winning titles. Peyton's done. Brady can't beat Luck with this New England roster because this New England roster is good. This is a real roster. This is the best roster the Patriots have had in a decade. If Brady can't win this weekend, if Luck beats him with this roster, it's all over. Manning and Brady are rearview mirror stuff. Luck's going to own the AFC for a decade. And I'll say this. They're going to have to pay Russell Wilson a lot of money in Seattle. Okay, so that means they're going to have to get rid of some of these Cam Chancellor kind of guys. You know, not all of them, but they're going to have to get rid of some of these guys and pare back. I got to tell you, I'm a Seattle kid, but it's very interesting. I kind of think this is Seattle's last great team, because once you pay Russell Wilson, you can't just now. Russell Wilson is making like what a local DJ makes in Boston. He's winning Super Bowls. Everybody else is making $20 million a year. He's like a DJ in Iowa City. So, I mean, it's like, I kind of think for Seattle, you better win now. You better take advantage of this window, because you're not going to be able to keep all these guys. Already had to get rid of Percy Harvin, had to get rid of Golden Tate. You're going to have to get rid of maybe a left tackle or a great linebacker. So I go into the weekend, I kind of want to see Brady get one more Super Bowl. I kind of go into the weekend, I want to see Seahawks kind of get one more back-to-back Super Bowls, put them in kind of an elite class all time, because, I'm never in this spot. I'm never in this spot. I really not. You think I am. I'm not. I don't want to be right. I want to get it right. I'm not interested in being right. I'm interested in being interesting. I tell you this for 10 years. I want a victory lap for Tom Brady. One more encore. But if he loses, it's over. It's Andrew Luck's AFC, and he's going to own it for a decade. He'll go to 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 AFC championships. He will own it for a decade. He will. Okay, if you're winning, he got this team to the AFC championship. This team, they can't run. They don't have good line play. They can't run the football. Akeem nicks a shot. T.Y. Hilton drops as many as he catches. I mean, come on. I mean, it's unbelievable. They're in the AFC Championship. And my sister doesn't like sports. She's not into sports at all, okay? And this is the one time in my life. Like, my family didn't like sports. My late father didn't like it. My mom was British. She didn't even get it. She liked Benny Hill. I mean, she didn't even like soccer, and she was British. So I grew up in this weird family where I was the only, my pets didn't even like sports. I'm the only one that likes sports. So it's been kind of cool over the last couple of years. My sister now is into the Seahawks. Like, during the game, she's texting me, woo, woo, Russell Wilson. I'm like, all right, join the party. That's what I've been doing for 20 years. Nobody in my family ever cared. They didn't go to my games. They didn't care. I was like on an island for people that hated sports. And now my sister's like, oh, my God, this is so much fun. I'm like, hello, this is the life I live. It's all raising the roof, sister. Come on. So I want to see Seattle win for my sis and fam, and I want to see Brady win for legacy because, really, let's be honest. What if Luck beats Brady with this roster? It is over. Because if you gave Luck New England's roster and you gave Tom Indy's roster, it's a blowout. Because right now, Luck's better than Tom. He is. Got better feet, got a better arm, got a better body. He's more. He is. He's better physically than Tom. And intellectually, not many better than Luck either. Opening rant brought to you by Regis New Way to Work. Call 1-800-OFFICES. So I am rooting this weekend. So if it ends up being Green Bay and Indy, now I love Luck. You know I'm a Luck guy.
Yeah, what jersey you wearing this weekend?
I don't know.
You got your Tom Brady or Andrew Luck? What jersey?
I know.
Got?
I'm not a jersey guy, but I'm being honest with my audience right now. I'm being totally authentic. I am being totally authentic. I don't do this. I am pulling Sunday. I'm not even doing cocktail Sunday. I am going to be sober. I want to watch these games and analyze them. I'm not having a cocktail. I will consume a small plate of nachos and a major portion of rooting interest. And I've never been in this spot since I got into this business. When I covered UNLV and Jerry Tarkanian, honestly, I liked the way Duke ran their program. I really did. I respected Duke. When Duke beat UNLV, I was like, well, they run a really good program. People hated me for that. But I was like, well, they run a really good program. Be honest with you, when I was in Portland with the Blazers, I hated that team. I mean, outside of Steve Kerr, all those guys in the locker room, they were knuckleheads. So, like, when Shaq and Kobe would come to town, I was like, well, Shaq and Kobe are fun. You know, I wanted the fans in Portland to be happy. I like to see people I know be, and my friends were like season ticket holders, so I was rooting for my friends to be happy, but Shaq and Kobe were more interesting. And they were funny. Shaq was funny. The Blazers would go on the road, and they'd pile out of that Scooby-Doo van, go to a movie, and smoke would billow out of it. It was like J.R. Ryder and Bonzi Wells. Who wants to cover that team? They're the worst. So I'm letting you into a peeking into my life here. When I worked in Tampa, I didn't root for the Buccaneers. I didn't root for the Florida Gators. I didn't care about them. I mean, I just wanted good games. In fact, when I lived in Florida, you know who I rooted for? The Miami Hurricanes, because I thought they were more interesting. So I was the only guy living in Tampa. I didn't like the Gators or the Knowles. I liked the Hurricanes. I always liked the Miami Hurricanes. They were wild. They were outrageous. My two favorite college football teams, really, if you really got down to it, I love USC under Pete Carroll, and I love Miami under Jimmy Johnson and all the Dennis Erickson. They were just circuses. But this weekend, my house is foam fingers and a Seahawks Snuggie, baby. I've never done it. It's going to be so weird. And my wife's out of town, you know, and she's like, you know, I'm going to come home Sunday. And I'm like, I thought it was Saturday. She goes, no, I'm going to come home Sunday. I'm like, well, get your own ride. I'm not leaving the house. Do you ever hitchhike? Your thumb still work? I'm not picking you up.
Colin Cowherd.
The Thundering Herd Podcast.
You know, I had this discussion down in Fort Worth with a very prominent member of ESPN that everybody knows. I'm not going to give it away, but he's got some kids. And he said, you know, it's different. When I grew up, I was outside playing all day and fight. And that's why I'm now, as a broadcaster, kind of a fighter. And he goes, you know, my kids just don't have the same fight. And I said to this person, yeah, that's because you have crown molding. That's because your kids walk into a 6,000 square foot house and go on big vacations. And I said it's called affluenza, the disease. John McEnroe was once asked, how come your kids aren't great at tennis? And he said they suffer from affluenza. They're not afraid of anything. They don't have any fight. They don't have any grit. They've grown up in, you know, Long Island mansion. And it's really funny. We want our kids to have fight and toughness and grit in an ever-competitive world, but I think a lot of parents, we're afraid of the process to get there. You get there with failure, and you get there when your kids get embarrassed. They lose games. They get embarrassed and they cry. That's how they get the grit. But you as a parent and I as a parent, we're just kind of afraid of that. We don't like to see our kids cry. But that crying is how they get the anger and the drive and the grit and the tough. You take an animal out of the wild early and feed it, it goes back to the wild and dies. It has no survival instinct. When it's got to fight for a meal, it's a tougher animal. You know, there was a great line. It's one of my favorite lines ever. And I'm putting it in my second book. It was by Larry Ellison, who runs Oracle. And Larry Ellison was given up for adoption by his birth mother. Then he lost his adoptive mother to cancer. He dropped out of school and was really a poster boy for adolescent angst. And he was interviewing with 60 Minutes one time, and Oracle's one of the biggest companies in the world. And he says, Steve Croft, I think, said, mother dies of cancer, adoption, dropped out of school. And Larry Ellison stopped him and said, yes, I've had all the disadvantages required for success. Disadvantages. Fight. So what am I leading to? Yesterday, there was a girls' high school basketball game. It was 161-2. 161-2. And the team that scored 161, their coach, he got suspended. That's bad. That's a bad guy. Can I just tell you, no kid, ask a therapist, 30 years later, becomes an adult, ends up on a psychiatrist's couch saying, I lost a basketball game and I almost ended it. For the rest of my life, I couldn't get over it. They were over it 15 minutes later. Let's go to Subway and get a sandwich. I want ice cream. You know who couldn't get over it? The parents, who want their kids to have fight and grit, but are afraid of the process to get there. You know how you get there? Crying, failure, embarrassment. It's a vaccination for failure later. My daughter played in a town team, 4 straight titles. And she had a great coach. They were okay. They had a great coach. Ed Connors, great coach. It was like the best youth coach I'd ever seen. And after about 2 years, I said, I'd kind of like to see him lose. I kind of want to see my daughter cry. He goes, what are you talking about? I'm the coach. I said, I know, but winning 58-8, that's cotton candy living. And so my daughter lost the game, came home and cried. And I remember telling my ex-wife, I'm like, that she'll get something from. That she'll learn something from. It was funny because the opposing coach said, people shouldn't feel sorry for my team. They should feel sorry for his team, which isn't learning the game the right way. Whether that's right or not, 161-2. The kids, they'll be fine. Either they want a Subway sandwich 10 minutes later and forget about it, or they'll use that as motivation to practice harder the next week. We want our kids to have grit. You know how you get grit? You lose 161-2. That's how you get grit. You don't get it winning 161-2 for 7 straight years. Parents go crazy on this stuff. They go crazy. Kids are fine. Kids are fine. Think about many of the people in positions of power and esteem in America today. They were in wars. They saw people die in front of them, those images. These kids lost a basketball game. The Greatest Generation, Tom Brokaw's book. They saw friends die. They had to shoot people. They were on the battlefield. They lived without. Now they run the country. What are we afraid of? The young kids who haven't gone to war. Somebody lost a basketball game. They're not going to end up on a psychiatrist's couch. We're uncomfortable with it. The kids aren't. The kids aren't. They want a Subway sandwich 15 minutes later. They're okay with it. But now I know what you're going to say. This is not the right way. Well, there's, Lance, you're in the herd. Go ahead.
Tom, man, look, I'm a big fan of your show, but you're out of your mind if you're going to sit here and try to convince people that winning a game 161-2 is okay. And yeah, the kids will be fine, but it's insulting by a grown man. It's the coach's responsibility there. You know, that's just wrong. I mean, competitive nature is one thing, but that's just, you can't compare that. You can't.
Lance, you can't in your life. If you're in sports, there's going to be jerky coaches. You've probably coached against them. The bottom line is you can't.
I know that.
Yeah, so do I. I got beat 50-0 as a junior in high school in football. Art Snell was the coach, and my coach hated him. And he was in Rochester, Washington, and I always said, you know what, man? Thank you. I hated that team forever. I wanted to beat that team so bad. You can't worry about what other coaches do and what other people do because there's idiots. There's people that are like egomaniacs. But the bottom line about sportsmanship is none of these kids, because that's what we're all mad about, right? We're all mad about the kids. I'm not validating the game. I'm saying what we're concerned about with that score, it's not about sportsmanship. We're concerned about the kids. That's what we're all freaking out about, right? It's all about the kids. It's not about the score. You don't care about sportsmanship. What the hell is sportsmanship? I mean, what is it? What would be okay? Would you be okay if the score was 80-7? Would you be okay if it was 70-11? I mean, clearly one team was great and one team was incompetent. What would make you happy? 161-2 bothers you. What would be okay? Because the one team tried not to score in the second half. So when they tried not to score, they outscored them 40-1. So what if they'd have won 80-2 to the girls? Then are they okay? The truth was this was a wild mismatch, and it happens all the time. I've seen it. You get communities that are well-funded, and they've got 7 Division I players, and you have poor communities that aren't well-funded. Blowouts happen in minor sports. You can't avoid them. I've seen it happen. We had a great coach. We got ahead 50-3 on people, and we were trying not to score. You can't tell kids to go in and not try the second and third team. Blowouts happen in sports, youth sports, bad, ugly. So what would make you happy? 48-1? The point is, the kids who lose these games don't end up worse for it. They don't. You're getting caught up in the score. It's an ugly, embarrassing loss. There'll be 40 in the country tonight in youth sports. There'll be, I guarantee you, there's an 80-4 happening in every state in this country tonight. Doesn't matter if it's 161-2 or 80-4. It doesn't hurt the kids, is my point.
You're in the herd. The Thundering Herd Podcast.
I don't like when games are 160-2 in youth sports, but you can't avoid blowouts in youth sports. You can't avoid them, folks. You have well-funded high schools, poorly funded areas. In pro sports, we have blowouts. In college sports, we have obscene blowouts. Kentucky basketball is going to beat most teams by 50. But in youth sports, you have unbelievable blowouts every weekend. And my point was, I don't like coaches who do that. They're schmucks. But A, you can't control schmucks in life. And B, the kids are fine. They're fine. I'm not defending rolling over teams. But ask yourself this. My daughter played in a team, and they fast break, and they press. That's what they did. That was their offense. So you put in the third-string kids, they still press. And we had 9 good players, and the other team had 1. What are you going to do? I mean, Oregon football plays one style. They win games 68-6. Don't schedule them. ESPN Radio presented by Progressive Insurance. Call, click today. Dan Le Batard, highly questionable, many ESPN radio stations. He's my guy joining us in the herd on ESPN Radio. So a lot of topics to get to, Dan. First time in my adult life, Dan, I'm rooting for a specific Super Bowl. I want the Patriots and Seahawks. Grew up near Seattle. Love Brady. Do you think less of me? Do you root for teams?
Do I think less of you? I would say that I'm rooting for the opposite Super Bowl. So yes, I think.
Why? Why?
Because I'm rooting for Aaron Rodgers, the best I've ever seen. He's the best quarterback I've ever seen. I want to see him. I like change in conferences. I like new champions. And from this group of 4, Seattle's the most recent champion, even all four of them have won. And in keeping in that same vein, I root for New England to keep winning. Like they've had enough winning. They've had enough success. They don't need any more titles.
That is so Dan Le Batard. You just don't like these corporations getting bigger. That is why I love Dan Le Batard. I was told years ago, and I'm not really a journalist. You are, but you've also kind of morphed into journalist / curious entertainer dude. I've heard the Bush brothers are the worst human beings on the planet. And they got this story about the girlfriend being an assassin, and I told my audience 2 days ago, if the Bush family says anything, I'm not talking George Bush, I'm talking the racing Bush family, don't believe anything they say. I heard you had a run-in with the family.
I wouldn't say we had a run-in. We had a very uncomfortable interview because I was just asking them, the Bushes like to fight. They have fights, and so I was asking him about his fights, and he didn't like the line of questioning, and then he just hung up on me, which is, was kind of amusing, the idea that that's how that would end. The conversation about losing your temper would end with him hanging up on me.
But you've done that. I mean, Jay Billis once hung up on you, didn't he? I mean, you kind of get feisty with people. That's kind of your thing. That's why people love your show.
I think, Colin, that it's not feisty because I don't really like confrontation. I think it's more that I'm just clumsy and awkward. And beyond that, I do believe that when you're in the business that we're in, that this is a transaction, that the guest, while guest sounds like something that you have to be hospitable to when someone comes into your house, to me the responsibility is to the listener.
Right,
so the guest's responsibility, if he's coming on the air or she is coming on the air to sell something, as most of these people usually are, then they have a responsibility to be entertaining. Because my first responsibility, you've got to think the same way, right? Your first responsibility, and this can become tricky when people are in studio because you want to be polite and everything, but the first responsibility is to your audience member, not to the person sitting there.
No, I always felt David Letterman had it right. David Letterman and Rob Burnett, when they invited you on the show, they wanted you to bring something. Like, if you couldn't bring a story or a shtick, they wouldn't invite you back on the show. So I say, when I bring people on, I'm like, tell me your best stuff. I'm going to set you up. Because the worst thing is getting a yes man. Like, those are the worst guests in the world. So sometimes I'm like you. I don't like conflict. But it does make better radio, right?
Oh, for sure. But explain this to me, though, because why is it that, keep in mind, we're in the games business. We're in the entertainment business. Ostensibly, we're not talking about real serious stuff and politics. Why is it that everyone is so handcuffed, Colin? Like, why is there not a Howard Stern in our business? And I'm not talking about wacky journalists. I'm talking about Howard Stern, the interviewer. When someone goes on Howard Stern's show to sell something, they know they have to give up everything. And too much of sports radio is we're talking about the coach, talking to the coach who won't give us anything.
Yes.
He's like, program.
You know why?
Like,
Why? Because, remember, most of these companies, Fox, ESPN, they're based in journalism. And so there is a sense that there are lines you shouldn't cross because we have contracts. Like, Howard doesn't have a contract with Gwyneth Paltrow. He's just trying to get dirt, and he's therapeutic for her, and vice versa. There is and I think it's kind of baloney, there is this sort of sense that we have got to be protective of, and you know what I've always said to this? And by the way, this is offensive to people. I'm an entertainer. That's how I have no problem in my contract putting Colin's an entertainer. But if I say that, I'll get eaten alive by people in this building. And I think it's stupid because we're all trying to be entertaining.
Oh, but this is tough for ESPN. This is a conflict that ESPN is always trying to manage because the first letter in ESPN is for entertainment, but we have some journalism sensibilities. I thought it was real interesting. I thought we reached an interesting point as a company here when, as a corporate partner, we decided to go in on Roger Goodell. That is not normal.
Right.
That is not like... There are so many conflicts there between the journalism and the entertainment, and radio's kind of a different beast. But I just don't get, Colin, I don't get how it is that the entertainer is going on Howard Stern show and giving you glimpses that are super personal about their intimate lives, and we're talking to Russell Wilson, and we can't get an interesting syllable out of him. Like a quarterback, like we can't get an interesting syllable out of him.
Well, we've on our show over the last couple of years, we've made a real movement to stay away from jock talk. Now it's not easy because Super Bowl week you'll have jocks. But yesterday my producer came up to me and said, he named 4 quarterbacks, and I'm like, I passed on all of them. I'm like, none of them are interesting. Like that's the reality of our business. Jock talk, and some of my rivals in this business on other networks, it's just jock. Almost none of them have anything interesting to say. I'm serious. I'd bring on you, Bill Simmons, Jason Whitlock. You're interesting. Most jocks are just not interesting people. Well, they are, but they'll never give you anything.
Well, that one's an interesting dance because, and that's a generalization. Like, I wouldn't hit everybody with that. I do think that we've created a climate where it doesn't serve the athlete to tell the truth.
That's
because
right.
we've got an argument culture, and it's just not worth it for them. So we're contributing to it. But Scott and I have this conversation all the time. He'd like to have Tiger Woods on, and I've got no interest in having Tiger Woods on because Tiger Woods, while everybody would like the fame of it, you're going to end that interview and you're going to be like, nothing was said there. Like, I'd rather have the guy who's going to be an entertaining talker, who's going to say interesting things, than the guy who's programmed to be corporate careful.
So are you LeBron's struggling, David Blatt's not working, we all know this, Kevin Love will probably leave. In the end, are you gloating just a tad here? Are you gloating? You could admit it. You're gloating, Dan, just a little on this.
You know what? I'm not, Colin, and it's funny because nobody believes me because I put up those I put up those billboards in Ohio as a joke just because it's keeping with my sensibilities. Like, we were just joking around, but the guys on my show are super bitter and anti-LeBron. I'm not. I love when the player has the power. I just can't believe. I didn't think he was misusing it. I really didn't. I thought he was doing it right.
Yeah.
But he's doing it right. But he built the team wrong. Like, it's pretty clear that he underestimated the sacrifices and the contributions of the people in Miami. And why wouldn't he, by the way? Because it felt like in 2012 he won the finals, that in 2013 Dwayne was hurt, and it felt like he was the only reason they were winning. But it's pretty clear in retrospect that he wasn't the only reason they were winning. Dan Le Batard, good talking to you, buddy. Always good talking to you, Colin. Thanks for having me on.
Super talented guy. Love bringing him on, talking about stuff. I'm going to bring, I made a New Year's resolution for this show. More Simmons, Le Batard, Whitlock. And just no, I'm telling you, man, a lot of jocks are boring. I know, I'm sorry, but they are. They just bore me. They really do. And a lot of you are freaking out. You're mad at me because you think I'm rooting for girls' basketball teams to lose 161-2. It's not what I said. What I said is in youth sports, blowouts are unavoidable, excuse me. They're unavoidable. Hell, they're unavoidable in college sports. Go look at Kentucky's first 9 games. But in youth sports, well-funded town, poorly funded town, every single one of you guys listening to the show probably played high school football. There's always a powerhouse in every league, and there's always an awful 4 teams in every league, and then everybody else is in the middle. That powerhouse wins like 58-6 6 times. All those kids on a losing team, they don't end up on a psychiatrist's couch because of that. None of them. It doesn't matter. In fact, I'd argue it builds some character.
Want more of the herd? The Thundering Herd Podcast.
Geico presents Strange Saving Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
ESPN Radio. This is the Thundering Herd Podcast.
Just interesting topic today. A girls basketball team got beat 161-2, and they suspended the coach. Now, there's a lot of jerky youth coaches. Most youth coaches are great. They really are. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of youth coaches. 99.9% of them I love. My neighbor's one of them. And he just loves the game, and he loves the kids. And 99.9% of priests are good people. The 1% of schmucks and evil people get all the news. Most youth coaches are wonderful people. Men, women. My kids have had dozens. They're great. But there's always a schmuck in every league that has low self-esteem, and he wants to bear. You know, he's a loser. I mean, seriously, that coaching is the biggest thing in his life. He's got that's his whole life. Most of these guys give time they don't have to do it, and they're great. So, but what happens with youth sports is there's a lot of blowouts because it comes down to funding. And sometimes, we faced a team this year, and I'm not going to say where it was in my state, but it's a poor area, and those poor girls couldn't get shoes, and they were disorganized, and it was just brutal. But none of them are going to have worse lives because we beat them 58-8. Parents get way too caught up. It hurts your feelings. It hurts your feelings. Your kid's fine. He wants a Subway sandwich 10 minutes later. My daughter cried once. It was when she lost. The following week, she never practiced harder. It was like there was a lesson in it, you know? Tim, you're in the Herd on ESPN Radio. Go ahead.
Yeah, Colin, Andre Agassi one time was blowing this guy out, just pounding him, and he would not let up. And afterwards, he was asked after the match, why didn't you let up on this guy, just cruise out the match? And he said there was something that he needed to learn about himself in that moment, and I did not want to rob him of that opportunity. Just another perspective on blowouts.
Yeah, and you know what, Tim? What's also interesting is a lot of the great athletes like Michael Jordan's DNA, he's never going to let you win a game of checkers. I mean, that's just Kobe Bryant is bizarrely, obsessively competitive, Tim, and that's why he's great. I mean, a lot of these sports stars are Tom Brady. Did you see Tom Brady this past weekend after they scored? It's incredible. The guy's almost 40. I don't think he's ever been more competitive. And I know somebody inside the organization said Brady is at practice, won't give his backup snaps. Is it insecurity? I don't know what it is, but that's what makes him great. So a lot of athletes, I remember when Nebraska, in the mid-'90s, Nebraska was just, I mean, they were a machine. And they were rolling through their conference. They were up on teams like 56-0 in the first half. And Tom Osborne's like, listen, what am I supposed to tell my fourth-string tailback? Don't score? You know what? I mean, can I just tell you this? Do you want to know the highest percentage of Big Ten football players who become winners in life? It's Northwestern. Bad program. Northwestern, the brain school in the Big Ten, over the last 30 years has lost more football games than anybody in the conference. They've also produced more winners off the field. Those losses they build character. By the way, Vanderbilt has a terrible football program historically. Not terrible, but they're just not any good. Who puts more winners in society out than Vanderbilt in the SEC? Nobody. Go check in on LSU winning football players 20 years later. Check their lives out. Go check out Vanderbilt guys. Vanderbilt guys are on Wall Street. I mean, they're in Silicon Valley. The worst programs, football and college sports, where guys are getting pummeled, that's where all the winners come from because they have their life in perspective. The game doesn't define them. Somebody asked me yesterday, do you think Peyton Manning will struggle with retirement? And I said no, because people think Brett Favre is defined by football. Peyton Manning's defined by success. He'll become Roger Staubach. He'll make $700 million post-football. If I told you Brett Favre created a real estate company worth $1 billion, you'd say, you're high. If I said Peyton Manning, 10 years after football, owned 74 car dealerships and created a sports app that's the number 2 sport, you'd be like, oh, yeah, that's Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning plays football, but he's not defined by it. He can do a million things and be successful. Peyton Manning will never look in the rearview mirror. Now, he may go own a football team. He may be a general manager, but he is not defined. He's defined by brilliance and intelligence. He's intellectually curious. The guys that are defined by football that aren't intellectually curious, they retire and they get depressed. Peyton Manning will be like, what else in the world can I conquer? He'll be like, all right, next, and he'll be unbelievably successful. Just because you play football doesn't mean you're defined by it.
Technology gone bad. Gone bad. This is the Thundering Herd podcast.
And I've told you before, full disclosure, I don't go into games rooting for teams, but my sister's now into football because of the Seahawks, and I like to see my sister happy. And I think this is Tom Brady's swan song, potentially. I don't know. Does Tom have, if Andrew Luck and this Colts team keeps getting better, if Andrew Luck can get this team to the AFC Championship, this roster, I mean, if Ryan Griggs and the general manager of the Colts hits a couple of home runs in free agency, if Luck's getting to the AFC Championship with this roster, watch out. Okay, because it's the worst roster of the final 8 teams. Of the last 8 in, Indy's roster, in my opinion, is the weakest. And now it's in the AFC Championship? Now, that's not to say there aren't, I like their corners. I talked about this last week. I like the Colts corners a lot. Vontae Davis was good in Miami. He's good now. I think they're Their offensive line's getting better. Their tight ends and receivers are capable, but luck makes them. T.Y. Hilton is a drop machine. Akeem Nicks past his prime. The tight ends are good, not spectacular. They're okay. Dwayne Allen, Fleener, they're okay. They're good players. They're nice players. You'd like them on your team, but they're not great players. So to me, the fact that Luck got this team now here, oh boy. Oh boy. The other thing that I find really interesting, whereas with the Colts, you feel like Luck's carrying them, and he is to a large degree. People say, Colin, you're over complimentary of Russell Wilson. I don't feel Russell Wilson carries the Seahawks. To me, the Seahawks are really the most complete team. They have a great defense, and they have a great running game, and they've got a good offensive line, and they've got a really good quarterback, and they've got a really good head coach. Pete Carroll's gotten way too much of the credit. He deserves a lot of it. He deserves some of it, but it is a combination of things. I just don't think Seattle can. The window is, it's not going to be this great. What they did an amazing job of, John Snyder, the GM, is getting a bunch of 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round guys who are stars. And that allowed them for about 3 years to build this roster, and they're paying Russell Wilson pennies. So they're going to have to eventually pay some of these guys. And what happens when they do, they're going to have to let some, even their offense now, they let Percy Harvin and Golden Tate go. It's not as explosive. If, Max Unger, their center, got hurt, that is not great. They have shown an ability to overcome injuries on the offensive line. Max Unger, one of the better centers in the league, is out. That's not great for Seattle. That is not great. I saw this, that the Niners introduced Jim Tomsula yesterday. No frills. And even in the story, it's like, it was a no-frills affair. Quite a departure from the pomp and circumstance of Jim Harbaugh. Then I read another story. Everything's now being leaked. This comes from a story in San Jose. Jim Harbaugh and Jim Tomsula weren't on speaking terms at the end. Trent Baalke talked yesterday at the press conference, said, this will be our staff. Me, York, and Tomsula. Again, kind of a shot at Harbaugh. Listen, Jim Harbaugh turned around San Diego, Stanford, and the Niners 3 for 3, and he's going to turn around Michigan. And by the way, the job he just got whacked in, he turned around them. Anybody want to take a few bets on how he's going to do it in Michigan? How about we start with really good? He's going to do really well there. So whenever the fiery guy leaves who ruffled feathers, everybody loves to take shots at the fiery guy. We're going to hire somebody now that listens to us. All right. Okay. Now you got Jim Tomsula, position coach, players coach. All right. Good luck with that. But you think he's going to win 71% of his games? Why not? Because that's what Jim won. That fiery guy that's no good that turned around. Awful Stanford, awful San Diego, awful Niners. Overnight. Won 71% in the NFL. Parcells won 55%. Chuck Noll 55%. Okay. Marv Levy 58%. All right. So Jim Tomsula is going to win a bunch of Super Bowls, okay? All right. Just want to make sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. I mean, it's amazing. I'm not going to mention the name, but years ago when I first got to this company, we had this young guy. He was fiery. This fiery guy, right? He offended people. And he left. He made zillions of dollars and stuff. And boy, when he left, everybody was like, yeah, that guy did a lot of, a lot of really creative, smart stuff. A lot of it. That fiery guy at your office, everybody badmouths when he leaves. He's also often the most creative guy. And he ruffles some feathers, but he gets a lot of stuff done. Brett Favre was on Mike and Mike this morning. Brett Favre's Hall of Fame all-time guy. I thought he had a very interesting take that he was talking about Peyton Manning and about how, guys, Peyton Manning doesn't like his last game. He wants to get back to that game. But the problem is when you're a quarterback, there's no guarantees you're going to get back, even to the playoffs. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And Andrew Luck's only getting better. And Brett Favre said similarly, here's what he thinks after that loss in the playoff. This is what's going through Peyton Manning's mind right now, or retirement.
It's just so hard to get here and get back and be consistent in getting to that point. It's so hard. Not to mention the age. You don't move or you don't throw as well as you once did. And more importantly, I don't want to say you hate football at that point. You hate the situation. But there's nothing you can do about it. And the last thing you want to think about is doing it again. You would love to snap your fingers and know that you're at that position again next year to redeem yourself, but it's just not that easy. And so do you come back and try to redeem yourself, or do you face heartbreak yet again? And that's the decision.
And I really honestly believe, I don't think Peyton Manning's going to get back to a Super Bowl. A, he's not the quarterback he was. B, the Broncos are going to lose some free agents. C, they're bringing in they're going to have a new coach, which is always, that can take time. And D, Andrew Luck's just getting better by the minute. But I thought Favre also, this is pretty interesting, he compared the retirement decision to when he was a kid to the end of the school year.
I'm going to use this analogy. When you were in grade school, you couldn't wait to get out. Come May or whatever, boy, you're chomping at the bits to go into summer and get away from school. But somewhere late June or whatever it would be, a week or so before school started, you kind of look forward to going back in a strange sort of way. And then the cycle started over again. Somewhere along school, you go, oh gosh, this is, I hate this. And that's kind of the way it was for me, and maybe it is for Peyton.
I thought that's a really good analogy. I thought that was really well done on Mike and Mike this morning by Brett Favre. It is a little bit like school, I'll say this, though. Peyton is older, and he's a little creakier, and he's a little more sore, and those bruises last a little longer, and Kurt Warner knows about this. It is a really tough decision, but I'll tell you this. I'm excited. I'd like to see Peyton Manning go into the front office and run a team like Elway. I think it'd be fascinating because I think he really – I'll tell you what. There's 4 or 5 people in my life who have changed football to a thinking man's game. Bill Walsh, Don Coryell, I thought really changed it. Bill Belichick, I think Parcells, Chip Kelly, Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning took the game intellectually to a completely different level. He made you as a quarterback. People heard what Peyton Manning was doing, and if Brady, hey, you got to keep up with Peyton. He's going to the line with 4 audibles. So Peyton Manning deserves all our respect because to me, I don't even think about Peyton Manning. If you asked me to define Peyton Manning, I would say big, huge brain. He took the quarterback position from gunslinger, Terry Bradshaw, Brett Favre, to intellectual position. And for that, we owe him. And I think he's going to be Roger Staubach. I think Peyton Manning's going to be so successful out of football, and I can't wait to watch it. I'd love to see him take over a team. And I think he'd win. I think he'd build a great team. I really do.
Putting style in black T-shirts. It's Colin Cowherd, the Thundering Herd podcast.
All right, we once the regular season ends, I don't really do the Blazing 5. But we do the not-so-blazing 5, and I give you my picks for the weekend. And, you can agree or disagree. 1-888-SAY-ESPN, the phone number. I'll give you my picks. You can take them for what it's worth. So let's play the music and let's go. Let's start with New England, -6, 6.5 against Indianapolis. I think it's a good game. A lot of people say blowout. I don't see blowout. But I will tell you one thing that I know. Andrew Luck has struggled against one coach in this league, Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick, through the years, has even been kryptonite to Peyton Manning. He's a defensive guy. And it's going to be 15-mile-an-hour gusts. The Colts have no running game to speak of, and they don't have a dominant offensive line. This could be a very rough afternoon for Andrew Luck, who's being asked to carry his team. Now, the Patriots, when they're huge favorites, aren't necessarily a great favorite. But in the past 21 games, when laying single digits at home, New England 17-4 against the spread. And I just don't like physically the line play matchup for the Colts here. I think the Patriots have a better offensive front. I think the Patriots have a better defensive front. I think the teams both have great quarterbacks and great corners. And I do think that New England's offense can be at times too Gronk and Danny Amendola heavy. But the reality is Darrelle Revis and Brandon Brown are coming on board this year really creates matchup problems. I'm going to tell you something. New England's given Aaron Rodgers some issues, Peyton Manning some issues, Matt Stafford some issues, Andrew Luck some issues. This is not a coincidence. Andrew Luck has 8 picks in 3 career games against the Patriots, including the playoffs. That's the most against any opponent. So I just like the line play advantage for the Patriots. I like the fact that it's a 6.5 point spread. New England's not going to come in overconfident. They're going to come in with some urgency, play with passion, and they're going to come in, I think, 36-28. It's a competitive game, but it will feel like for most of the game, New England's in control, swallow the points. Seattle at home, minus 7.5 against Green Bay. I really don't like Seattle more than a touchdown usually, but there's 2 things working here. Green Bay is just not the same team on the road, and they weren't all year. They averaged 40 a game at home and 21 away from Lambeau. Aaron Rodgers wasn't even the same quarterback. And what Seattle does, it's very interesting. They're one of the great momentum teams in the NFL. First of all, under Pete Carroll, in games played December or later, they're 19-4-1 against the spread the last 4 years. They're great in December. Green Bay's not always great in December. Seattle also, when playing a second straight home game, pregame.com's RJ Bells fed me this morning. When Seattle plays a second straight home game, 20-4 against the spread, Seattle's one of those football teams that when they get it rolling, they are a momentum team. And right now, they are rolling. Remember, against physical teams the last few years, Green Bay been hot and cold. Against playoff teams this year, Seattle won 6 of 7, and Russell Wilson had 11 TDs and only 3 picks. Okay, also, these teams have met 2 previous times in the playoffs. Packers won them both at Lambeau. Seattle remembers it. It is payback time. I think Seattle, a great home team, is going to beat Green Bay, an average road team. Aaron Rodgers is not at 100%, and Seattle's got that Pete Carroll. He did this at USC. His teams play great late. They get momentum. They get hot. I'm going to swallow the points here and go 30-20 Seattle. Remember, I took Carolina in the points. I don't like giving up a ton of points. Carolina outgained Seattle, but Seattle's one of those few NFL teams that can get outgained and win going away. So I will take both New England and Seattle, teams I'm rooting for, to cover, but I don't think they're blowouts. A lot of people think they're going to be ugly. I do not. I think both those games into the fourth quarter are competitive football games, but I'll take the home teams. And I said this before the season. I think this is the best New England team since the Rodney Harrison, Teddy Bruschi undefeated team. This is a real team. They've got 4 or 5 hybrid players up front defensively that can cover backs, can pass rush. They've got great corners, legitimate safety. Their offensive line's not as good as previous years. Gronk's healthy. They've got a variety of running backs. They don't have a vertical threat passing, but they've got a ton of options and slot receivers. So there you go. And I know you'll think, oh my God, you're taking your favorites. It's not the way I play. It's not. I'm looking to get the games right. I think there's a reason both favorites are favorites. I will say this. If you had to pick an upset of the 2, if I said, gun to your head, one of them's going to be an upset, what would it be? Probably go Green Bay. Because, A, Aaron Rodgers, and I think Green Bay really has a nice roster. Like, outside of corners, Luck, I don't love Indy's roster. I really don't. Green Bay, let's just say this. Let's say it's going to be windy and rainy. Let's say Seattle coughs up a football and Green Bay gets a defensive touchdown, kills the crowd. Crowd just dead. And all of a sudden you go into half and it's like 10-9. Seattle's had to settle for field goals. Green Bay leads 10-9 and gets the opening second half touchdown, and Aaron has a great drive and they lead 17-9. You know what I mean? Seattle's, it's one of those things is it's going to be windy and wet. And may not be a lot of touchdowns. And if Green Bay can get 1 or 2 big plays from Aaron Rodgers, 1 or 2, and all of a sudden you got 14 points and Seattle's settling for field goals. Seattle's offense, it's very dependent on Russell Wilson making stuff up with his feet. They've got C- receivers, tight ends. They're not loaded.
Want more of the Herd? The Thundering Herd Podcast.
Welcome back, Trey and Mark. Is your show on today?
Yeah, every day.
As it is every day, yes.
4 to 5.
4 to 5 on ESPN.
ESPN.
You know what ESPN stands for?
It used to stand for Entertainment and Sports Programming Network.
Correct. It stands for nothing now.
Now it stands for nothing.
It's an acronym.
An acronym?
An acronym. That's not easy to say.
You know, the old story about I remember reading this sometime. They said they knew how old is this company? 30 years?
2079, so it's 35, I think.
They said they knew ESPN was getting popular when people started stealing their banners from events. Remember we used to watch ESPN?
Yeah.
And there was you'd see the sign, and people at the end of the game would be gone.
Yeah.
People were stealing
That's a good thing.
Yeah. So,
you know who stole a lot of those? Bob Lee.
Did he?
He sells them on the black market.
That explains
He's also an international arms merchant. Not many people know this. Bob is a double agent.
All right, here we go. Play some music. Let's start out in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes. You're from there.
Seattle and Green Bay.
Packers.
What? Seahawks.
Yeah. You messed it up. Why were you late?
Because I was just blown away.
Wow. Why?
Couple of things.
All right, I can't wait to hear this.
Okay. No, would it surprise me if Seattle wins? Absolutely not. But we did this breakdown on Seattle and the quarterbacks that they played. Now, they did this unbelievable stretch at the end of the season. 38 points in 6 games. Fantastic. And it was against Ryan Lindley, Sean Hill, Colin Kaepernick twice, and Drew Stanton. Some of those guys shouldn't be in the league, let alone starting quarterbacks in the NFL. If you go on total QBR, which is the ESPN advanced metric that we use here, through the first 6 weeks of the season, including their bye, nobody played a tougher stretch of quarterbacks than the Seahawks. In that time frame, they were 3-2. Since week 7, they've had the 3rd easiest run of opposing quarterbacks. Only the Ravens and the Browns and the Texans had an easier run. So,
by the way, Cam had some success.
Cam, if he doesn't throw, and it was a horrible decision.
Just one.
That one interception.
He played
It's a one-possession game with 6 minutes to play. It changes. That play changed everything. Look, I think the Packers have more than a puncher's chance to go in there and win because Aaron Rodgers is going to be the best quarterback that defense will have seen since Tony Romo went up there and beat him. And the Packers can do the one thing that every team that has beaten Seattle does. They run the football well. Remember, they were moving the ball with authority until Eddie Lacy got concussed in that game. So this all hinges on Rodgers being somewhat healthy and Eddie not being dinged.
Mark?
Yeah, you almost talked me into it.
No kidding.
But, yeah, it was great.
I like Green Bay on a route. My bad. 48-0.
Yeah, the statistical analysis was awesome. I will say this. On the road, Aaron Rodgers, in 3 of 4 losses, on the road to Seattle, didn't have 200 yards passing, 1 pick, 1 touchdown.
That's Detroit.
Against Detroit, he didn't have 200 yards passing. And I believe, I think he threw 1 touchdown, no picks. And against Buffalo, didn't have 200 yards throwing.
That was a bad day. Yeah.
All on the road, 2 picks, although they were off receivers' hands. But the bottom line is it's really hard to go into those tough environments and play exceptionally well. And Aaron Rodgers, obviously we know he's a little bit hobbled. We saw it. Even though he's deadly accurate, he's phenomenal. There is no faster sideline-to-sideline football team on the defensive side and not a better tackling team than the Seattle Seahawks.
Let me say the one thing, and I said this earlier, I picked Seattle, but it's going to be sloppy. It's going to be raining and wet. Could be a lot of field goals. My gut feeling is you're going to have about 4 minutes left. Aaron's going to have the ball. You know, because in the NFL now, 4 minutes means 2 possessions.
Right.
I think the one thing that Trey is saying is if Seattle got outgained by Carolina. Seattle gets outgained a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't buy into this Green Bay is going to get smoked thing.
No, I think it'll be a tight game. I don't think there's any question. I just think with the crowd noise, I mean, it's incumbent upon you as an organization to eliminate your 7-step drops. You got to run it not sideline to sideline. It's one of the things they did wrong in that first game, and hopefully they learn from it. Their yardage came right not between the tackles, but between guard and center.
Yeah.
And they started getting some wide zone stuff, and they got crushed in that trying to basically get to the edge with their running backs. Seattle is 100%. You got to go straight downhill on them,
like DeMarco Murray did.
Right, and you cannot get sideline to sideline on them. They're just too dang fast. The crowd noise is legit. You got to give your offensive line opportunities and 3-step drops to attack the line of scrimmage to basically confuse them a little bit. Okay. But the bottom line, they're just so athletic. They're so fast. They're so long.
Okay,
I just have a tough time.
Let's go to the next one. New England, Indianapolis.
Patriots
as well.
Good game though.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really good game. Look, if Joe Flacco doesn't make a horrible decision on 2nd and 5 with 1:44 to play, we could be talking about the Ravens playing in this contest. Joe Flacco played great in that game, and remember, there was 1:44 left. They had a 2nd and 5, I think, at the 40-yard line of the New England Patriots, and he threw it into double coverage in the end zone. For what possible reason, I have no idea. A field goal ties the game. Was it 35-31 or 38-35? I can't remember.
Yeah,
it was 35-31, so a field goal would be tied. So the point is, you didn't need to make that throw at that point. You had to make sure you extended the drive and kept the game going as long as possible. He played brilliantly in that game, but he made one critical mistake. And if Andrew Luck can avoid the critical mistakes, they've got a great chance.
Andrew Luck has thrown picks. He threw 2 last week against the Denver Broncos.
8 in 3 games against the Patriots.
Here's the issue I think that the New England Patriots have with the Ravens. First and foremost, the Ravens are not intimidated to go to New England.
Not at all. I think Indy may still be.
They haven't beat him yet.
The other thing about the Ravens, from a matchup standpoint, Bill Belichick has talked about it. Teddy Bruschi's talked about it. I had a 2-hour dissertation with Eric Mangini when he worked there about how to defend the zone running scheme, because he said that's the thing that we have the most difficult time defending, and Gary Kubiak runs that Denver zone system. So you saw them run the ball with Forsett, have a lot of success on the play action off of that stuff. Indianapolis still, I know Boom Herron's been great, but they still don't know how to run the ball. They don't run that system.
Very similar to where it was when Peyton was there.
Right, exactly. So I look at that as being a very difficult thing to overcome. The other thing about playing New England, I've played them a bunch of times under Bill Belichick, is what you worked on all week, you might as well scrap pile it. You better be great on the sideline about getting your grease board out and saying, okay, game plan, guys, here it is. Because what you've done all week is not what you're going to see. What they did in that Week 11 matchup, 2 tight ends, 2 running backs, 22 personnel, cram it down your throat. It's almost like goal line, right? They'll come out in that formation. You know what? They'll explode out of it, and it'll be a complete passing game. Right? They'll throw it 32 times out of that personnel
How about
grouping.
The second half against Baltimore? They never ran the ball. One carry.
But I think that's game plan specific to what they thought they couldn't do against the Ravens. Right. The last 2 times they've played the Colts, and they may try and do it differently. I think until the Colts prove they can stop the run, they're going to run at them. Because it was the Jonas Gray game, Week 11, 4 touchdowns, 200 yards. In the divisional round last year, it was LeGarrette Blount who had 4 rushing touchdowns. Brady didn't throw a touchdown pass in that win over the Colts last year.
It'll be, and I agree with you, they're going to run it. But what they ran it out of last time, they'll probably throw it out of, and it'll get you in a sub package and a nickel thing, and they'll have runs out of that. It's just the way they operate. They're a team that doesn't they don't say, this is who we are and this is what we're going to do, you defend it. They say, what's your weakness? Oh, there it is over there. How are we going to attack it?
Yeah, that's what
they'll attack it all the time.
That's where he's reinvented football coaching a bit with that.
He's the best at that.
He's game specific.
He's the absolute best at that, and in many ways, that's the difference in wins and losses. Like the lateral pass from to Amendola from Edelman. Who else has that in their game plan to call it at that specific time? That's what makes Bill great. That's what makes him different.
This was a spectacular meat sandwich. This was good. I really like that. Tasty. How about his take on Green Bay? That was revolutionary.
Yeah, it was.
I'm just throwing it out there. That's all I'm saying. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Okay, the Seahawks defense was phenomenal, but look at who they played.
One thing happens in a vacuum: it sucks.
Exactly.
That's why they invented it.
That's a you problem. That's not a me problem.
No, I'm just telling you.
One last thing. This is Brady's 9th AFC title.
Is that incredible?
9th. He has a chance. Either way, someone is going to join the most exclusive club in NFL history in the AFC title game. Only one player in NFL history has played in 6 Super Bowls. Mike Lotish, who lost 4 with the Buffaloes, then courtesy of Mark Schlereth, 1-2 with the Broncos.
Carried him.
Either Brady goes to a 6th or Vinatieri goes to a 6th. So there'll be 2 guys after Sunday who will have played or were going to play in 6 Super Bowls.
Where's Marty Lotish now?
Mike Lotish? I don't know where he is right now. He's probably somewhere polishing Mark's car, because if it hadn't been for his play on the guard, he would not have won those 2.
Mr. Lotish is my pool boy.
Mike Lotish.
Mike Lotish. I think he's actually from Michigan. He's out in Michigan. I think he has a business going out there. He's a good guy.
Lotish Enterprises.
Lotish, and Lotish.
Lotish2and4.com.
Check out The Herd with Colin Cowherd weekdays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio, ESPNRadio.com, and on ESPNU. The Thundering Herd Podcast.